relatively free of sectarian bloodshed, at least since the Taliban were driven from power in 2001.
Yeah, it's sort of somewhat ironic because for most people they would view Afghanistan as a country which is just earmarked by violence, and that's certainly been the case in the last 10 years since the Taliban was sort of ousted from power. But the reality is in the last decade, minority groups actually haven't been targeted the way that the Shiites were yesterday. Now, the Shiites make up roughly around 20% of the population. They're effectively what's called ethnic Hazaras. And while they did face brutal discrimination during the Taliban years, they certainly were not singled out for attacks during this insurgency. So Tuesday's bombings do arouse fears that these extremists, whoever were behind these bombings, and I'll talk about that, who might be responsible in a few minutes, are trying to provoke a reaction similar to what we saw in Iraq in 2006, when there was a bombing of a Shiite shrine in Samarra, which ignited afterwards 2 years of tit-for-tat violence. And the attacks, of course, were carried out by militants aligned to al-Qaeda, which clearly has an anti-Shiite policy. Now, the main thing is that Shiite religious and community leaders have been very quick to call for calm and warning that, if indeed there was a violent response, they are just, in the fact, playing into the hands of those responsible. That's giving exactly what the killers want. But it will be interesting to see how this continues. Will they be able to sort of keep the lid on things, or will there be sort of hardline elements within the Shiite community who are going to want to retaliate and retaliate harshly?
And the Taliban said that it's not behind these attacks. There's been a claim of responsibility, though, by a Pakistan-based militant group. What do we know about Lashkar-e I'm not sure if I'll pronounce it right.
Lashkar el Javangi. As you pointed out, Claire, the Afghan Taliban was very quick and sent out an email saying, no, it wasn't us. But the sort of targeted strikes by Sunnis against minority Shiites, as I said, are alien to Afghanistan. So it's no surprise, according to Afghan commentators, that this group, this Pakistani-based extremist group, have come forward and declared responsibility, because in Pakistan, Sunnis and Shiites have been killing each other for decades. The group has never, however, previously carried out any attacks in Afghanistan. It's inspired by a fundamentalist philosophy that justifies killing Shiites because of their beliefs, and it's also, in Pakistan, targeted Americans, Christians and other minorities as well. But their claims have fueled suspicions that al-Qaeda, possibly some Taliban elements, and maybe the ISI, the Pakistani Intelligence Security Agency, might have a hand in this, that they all work together to carry out these series of attacks. Because even if indeed it was them responsible, given the nature of the attacks, they would need local know-how. They need on-the-ground people. So it couldn't just be them single-handedly, and they couldn't have carried out without substantial support from locally based groups as such.
Now, this comes as NATO troops are withdrawing. Most foreign troops should be out of the country by 2014. And this, of course, is the last thing that NATO needs.
Absolutely. And, what we've seen in recent months, Claire, is a sort of a violence spiking because NATO is working hard to prepare for that withdrawal in 2014. And, of course, the timing of these attacks came as there was a conference going on in Bonn in Germany about the future of Afghanistan, which had been viewed as an opportunity for Afghanistan to cement long-term support from the West. The problem is that Pakistan didn't turn up because they are extremely angry with the Americans still over the attack on their soldiers last week, which saw the deaths of some 24 of their troops, and nor did the Taliban. So, the fact of the matter is, the question does come back, what was the motive of all this? Is it indeed an attempt to sort of, cause further disruption, cause sectarian violence? According to the Human Rights Watch, it certainly was a unique opportunity to wipe away any optimism from this conference and generally about the country's future. And it's what I call nothing to lose mentality, because if you've had the Taliban who believe that pursuing violence is a worthwhile objective, then at the end of the day, it's not any surprise that at some point that minority groups are also going to be targeted as well.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Annette Young. And for those viewers who want to follow you on Twitter, your address is?
It is @AnnetteF24, and feel free to tweet. I want to hear what you have to say.
Thanks very much, Annette. Now, in other news, they knew they could be arrested. They knew a water cannon could be turned on them. But last night, hundreds, perhaps thousands of people took to the streets of Moscow and St. Petersburg anyway, some chanting, "Down with Putin." They say the election process was slanted in favour of the ruling United Russia Party. And that's what international monitors believe too.
An amped-up police force to deal with growing protests. Angered by the alleged fraud and energized by the declining support for Vladimir Putin's party, demonstrators defied a police crackdown for the second consecutive day. 250 people were arrested in Moscow, according to Russian authorities, and 200 in St. Petersburg. Shame, Putin in jail. Throughout the day, demonstrators voiced their anger following widespread reports of irregularities in Sunday's parliamentary vote.
We need to protest, we need to mobilize more and more people, and of course we need to fight for recount of votes. If we will not be successful in terms of recount of votes right now, we have to mobilize more and more people to presidential elections.
Pro-Kremlin supporters also staged large rallies in Moscow. Thousands gathered in the streets without any intervention from security forces. Protests, fraud allegations, and united Russia's biggest electoral setback since Putin rose to power. Sunday's elections highlighted growing unease with the current leadership, but Putin dismissed the criticism.
Well, some say the ruling party is linked to robbery and corruption. The same thing happened during the Soviet era. Who was in power then? Everyone called them thieves and corrupt too.
The Russian prime minister is already looking ahead. He said he would reshuffle the government after next year's presidential election. But recent events suggest his return to the presidency may not be as trouble-free as expected.
Now, you may not have heard much about the Occupy Wall Street movement on the news recently, but there are no signs of it going away. This despite several camps being shut down over the last few weeks. In New York on Tuesday, people rallied around homeowners resisting eviction from foreclosed homes, and demonstrators also converged on the Capitol.
The people united will never be defeated.
The Occupy Wall Street protests are moving into the neighborhood. Facing eviction from public spaces across the country, protesters are reclaiming foreclosed homes and boarded-up properties, signaling a tactical shift for the movement against wealth inequality. On Tuesday, groups in more than 25 cities held protests publicizing the plight of homeowners facing eviction.
This particular neighborhood is really, as one of the speakers said, ground zero of the foreclosure crisis, perhaps in New York City. So really, we're bringing the Occupy movement to ground zero.
Protesters helped a homeless family move into one of the foreclosed properties in East New York.
We took matters into our own hands and claimed back property that was taken away from the community.
Meanwhile, hundreds of demonstrators headed to Washington, D.C. as part of a Take Back the Capitol effort. They staged sit-ins at many congressional and Senate offices, which are open to the American public.
This is the first time people have really been serious to come and talk to their own people. And I think that's one reason why money has kind of slipped in their pocket, is because lobbyists are taking over the hallways and people are forgetting that their voice is just as strong.
Some outstayed their welcome. Protesters have vowed to keep fighting for the 99%.
And staying in Washington, D.C., we end with some Christmas cheer. For just a few minutes on Tuesday, Democrats and Republicans set aside their differences at the lighting of the U.S. Capitol Christmas tree. Republican House Speaker John Boehner taking the lead. The tree's 118 years old. It's got 10,000 lights on it, 3,000 handmade ornaments. Let's now take another look at our headlines. Divisions over how to fix the euro ahead of another crucial summit. The question is whether or not to